Um, my short answer, Dr. Aline, is that we in the Caribbean are not necessarily different from most other regions or other people when it comes to seeing a crisis in our midst. Unless the thing has immediate proportions where you can quantifiably see the significant impact on property and persons cumulatively, you know, through a single incident or, you know, a number of incidents occurring in quick succession. There's not a comprehension of just how grave the threat is. And this again feeds, although I'll come back to Mr. Ramcharan's remarks, which I think are very important, but it feeds into a point that he also made in his question, which is, you know, basically, where do you start this whole process of doing your necessary advocacy? Because the fact is that it is your responsibility. It is the Caribbean's responsibility to make these arguments, to package these realities in a way that the international community can understand the kind of imminent threat that does exist. And I'm saying that with respect to crime and security, with respect to crime and violence particularly, there is not the kind of concurrent advocacy that would raise this issue to a level within the international community where it can actually be taken seriously, or serious enough to elicit the kind of response and resources that will definitely make an impact on this level. So the fact is that there's a lot of work for us to do regionally, certainly with respect to our own regional entities, to really make that case and make it with great clarity. I mean, we saw the numbers today as presented by Professor Diosaran. And I mean, he, of course, had a very flippant and acceptably so way of, you know, talking about the Caribbean being first. But when you're looking at, you know, murder rates of 30 out of 100,000, leading the world, I mean, it's a distinction that clearly is in need of a major call to arms. And maybe, certainly in terms of a scalar comparative example, there were those who said, well, listen, the European countries had lost, you know, hundreds of people, if not thousands, over the decades due to terrorism. But one thing I can tell you is that even though on a numeric level, people were arguing about proportionality as far as September 11th was concerned, the United States certainly used that as an opportunity to sensitize the global community about the threat of terrorism. You have to use what is available to you, what tools there are, to sensitize the public, the international community, as to your priorities. And so I will say and I will accept that there is a lot that is yet to be done in this region in terms of adequately and satisfactorily doing this. Just to quickly pivot to Bertrand Ramcharan's statement and of course attendant question, which again has to do with advocacy. I don't know that we can really argue now that CARICOM has started a real structured process, excuse me, to really, one, do the intellectual work in terms of arriving at a set of key core objectives that we would want to advance in the international system as being priority to us. We have not gone there yet. Now, I'm saying that there are good starting points. Cricket World Cup was one of those. But have those conversations and have those attendant instruments that emanated from Cricket World Cup crystallized, have they cohered into a substantive body of thought that we are now putting out there as a region to influence debate. I think that we can easily answer that question. It has not happened to the extent that we are grappling with this in this discussion, in this forum. It hasn't happened. And so there's a lot of work for us to do in that regard. And to the extent that we can really advance this quickly, it has clear implications for the kind of quality of work that we will be able to achieve and the results that we'll be able to achieve. Because all of these initiatives are very resource dependent. And those resources are not emanating from the Caribbean. They have to come from the international community. And so my thing is that it really is, going back to Dr. Aline's question, time for us to really start that advocacy process, because it's not going to be advanced by any institution or any entity outside of this region. And just quickly on the matter of UNODC, again, a clear indication that unless you are talking about your issues, unless you are talking about and focusing on and turning the spotlight on your issues, it really tends to get lost within the global discourse. We have known that crime has really been, violent crime particularly, has really been a cardinal issue on the regional agenda for quite some time, certainly for the last 10 years. However, at the same time, you have been seeing diminishing resources, certainly on the side of entities like the United Nations, certainly UNODC, in engaging this issue, even while the problem is becoming more intractable and more chronic inside of the region. The reason why UNODC is doing this is obviously because there has been this increased advocacy from CARICOM saying, look, it doesn't make sense for you not to be focusing this right now. And so there was this meeting in February in the Dominican Republic that really turned the spotlight on that and said, listen, you just got to get back involved. This is where we are. So it was partly due to our own advocacy, talking about our issues, making our own case.
There was one question, I think, that was, if I'm phrasing it properly, what has been the CARICOM experience in shaping UN treaties? And based on my research, it has been quite limited. But I would say that I think there's a couple of things that we should note in that regard. First, there's, in my view, increasing evidence that CARICOM states have become more, have participated more in the process that, of review and implementation of treaties, and in particular both the Program of Action and the Firearms Protocol. I think there's more evidence there. And now, in the case of the, using the other example of the Register on Conventional Arms, I mean, it was a treaty that would make no sense in many ways for CARICOM countries to have been involved in when it was first set up. And now that it's pointed more towards small arms and light weapons, there does make more sense for CARICOM participation. That said, I would suggest that there are opportunities, including the two initiatives I mentioned, for CARICOM states to become more involved in shaping the new initiatives that are emerging around small arms and light weapons issues. And to give an example, well, I guess I go back to the point I was making at the end of my remarks, what I see as a strong argument for a regional agreement on small arms and light weapons in the Caribbean region, because there are precedents for regional agreements influencing UN agreements. And in particular, the example of the Nairobi Declaration on small arms that came into effect in 2000, a year before the Program of Action. That was a very influential document in putting together the UN Program of Action. So I think there are opportunities yet to come for CARICOM states to be more involved in shaping some of the UN agenda around these issues. And some of it can arise out of a regional approach becoming more clear within CARICOM itself.